Clark County School District Board of Trustees, District B, Eileen Edie. Um, yeah. My first question is, one of the most challenging parts of transitioning from middle to high school was the earlier start times, and I was gonna. Do you support measures to make school times later for the sake of high school students' mental and physical health, and why or why not?
That's a good question. So we do know that high school students do better if they're able to start later in the day, right? That's just science, right? That's what we know through studies. The problem here, I think, with our district is that we are so huge, but we are so short on buses, right? So while I do support that, absolutely, 100%. I get up at 5. I have a senior, and I'm excited because pretty soon I don't have to get up at 5 anymore. But I do wish they would start later. I think that we have to be careful when we decide that we're going to do this to redesign it in a way that no one gets left out, and that we're making sure that elementary school students aren't getting there too early, because if we have them starting their day that early and their dismissal is at 1:10, 1:20, like where do those kids go, right? So I think that it's not just something that a trustee can answer. I think it has to be like we got to put together a team and figure out how to make this work. I do think we could. I also think, though, it's going to be hard for like the state to make regulations about something like that, since every school district is different, right?
Okay. Another question is, what specific safety measures will you implement to protect students and staff members from potential threats?
I would like to introduce, first of all, de-escalation training to everybody. That is something that you can use when somebody's heightened in the moment. And if we train each other and you train the students to participate in that de-escalation, it helps everyone, right? I've worked in schools where we had to do that, where the students I worked with they had a lot of challenging behaviors and could be violent sometimes. And so we had to use de-escalation. And it's not that hard. And there's different techniques that even students can use with each other. So that's one of the things we have to look at. We have to look at de-escalation. I see the single entry. The rest of the single entry doors just went up around my son's school. So now you can definitely only get in the one way. And I do think that helps. But I really feel like when we're talking about school safety, we have to get to what's happening, right? What's happening that those other students are being violent? What's happening in our schools that kids don't feel safe, no matter who it is, whether it's the child that, is the one behaving in an unsafe manner, or whether it's someone who's feeling bullied. It's important that everyone feels safe. I would also then have to lean towards you guys, right? I asked my own son today in the car. I'm like, okay, so I'm meeting with these high school kids. Like, what do you think they might ask me? And he said, he mentioned grades, but that's the kind of conversation we need to have, right? I need to say to you, what is it that you don't feel safe? What is it about your school that doesn't feel safe to you, right? What does that mean? And then we have to look at those situations and back it up. Okay, what can we do to prevent them not being safe? So hopefully that helps you answer the question. It's not a simple answer, right? We have to we have to make the building safe, and then we have to figure out how to make the people safe,
Got it.
with each other.
Thank you. Yeah.
And how can curriculum relevance be improved to better prepare students for the future?
Oh, good question. So I started teaching in 1997, and it was actually before they passed No Child Left Behind. So in my classroom, we didn't have to teach to a test, right? And so my students learned something until they got it. They learned for mastery. They weren't trying to take a test. We needed them to learn what they needed. So there's a space for curriculum to be better, right? There's a space for curriculum to be more relevant to you guys. And I think that's what we need to look at. We look at school, I think, in an outdated model. Things haven't changed that much since 1997 when I started teaching, right? And so we probably need to look at that. We saw how different school can be during COVID. And I think that when we're talking about how you're doing in school, what curriculum is meaningful to you, we really need to know what you guys want. I was thinking about this on the way over here, like how could I make curriculum more approachable for kids? Like how could they care more about school? And I think it starts with what do you guys want to learn? Sitting down with the students and saying, okay, let's put a panel of kids together from the high schools and let's figure out what they want to see, right? We know these things are important. We have to get these, skills, but let's talk to them. What is meaningful to them? How can we get them to come in that door and stay focused and stay engaged? And how are we going to make that school experience meaningful for them? And I think that comes with, you have to have trade programs available. You have to have access to arts programs. You have to have access to things not every kid is going to do, right?
My second question is, to increase security at my school, CCSD recently put in a fence that surrounds my school to make it a single entry access point. And most of the schools like that I drive by every day, all of them have fences around them. And if elected, how will you work to ensure that additional? Oh wait, sorry, I missed something. It says, and I think while school security is important and having like stuff that'll keep students safe is important, how but I think that schools also serve as like a place where people in the community can come like have fun and like talk, meet each other, and like really create a community. And like if elected, how will you work to ensure that additional security measures don't make schools feel even more inaccessible to students, families, and community members?
That's a good question, because it does, right? It's intimidating to walk up to a school building and see gates everywhere, right? It wasn't like that when I started teaching. Columbine happened right after I started. And so then we started to see, that's when everything changed. I think that having community members feel safe means that you have to have your open doors, right? And so I would love to see community forums, at the schools. And the trustee where I lived previously did community meetings every month. And I would like to do that too, because when you're talking about people feeling safe, you got to let them in, right? That gate is intimidating, but you got to let them inside the gate and then they know everything's okay. And so we have to make that place welcoming. Even if there's a gate, we got to put some things up to make it not so scary, and so that's where it starts. And we have to be open to having the community members come in and I worked, one of the places I worked, there wasn't a lot of things for these kids to do after school. This was in Baltimore. And so the building was open up in the evenings so kids could come and use the basketball courts, and they worked with the community to kind of supervise that. And we can't always do those things, but I do think there's room for us to think about some alternatives.
Okay, one of my other questions are, if elected, what specific programs would you implement to prevent bullying in schools?
I would start with a student advisory council, first of all, because only you guys are going to tell me how I can help your bullying, right? I kind of have an idea. I raised 2 teenagers, and one's graduated, the other one's getting ready to. So I kind of know what that is. But I think that that's bullying is really difficult to tackle when you're an adult, right? We can have all the ideas we want in the world, but I do think we need to come talk to you guys. There's stuff they're doing already, but the fact that you're asking me that question means that something else needs to be done.
Thank you.
How does funding inequity impact educational opportunities for students?
Oh, I could talk about this all day. So I've worked in schools that have nothing, and I've worked in schools that have everything. And equity is really important. And we need to make sure everybody's educational experience is productive and equitable, no matter where they live. So it's important to keep that in mind, definitely. I think I answered it, but will you repeat the question again, just in case I didn't?
Yeah. How does funding inequity impact educational opportunities for students?
Yeah. So there is no mistaking that there's a correlation between funding and availability of funding and equity of education. So in order to have equitable education, in order to make those schools equitable, you have to have the right funding in place, which we don't have enough of, but we can work on that, right, guys?
My last question is that some of my classes have like interesting and discussions about what we're learning, and it's just like it's fun to be in those classes. And then some of the of my other classes have like worksheets that we need to complete most of the time instead of discussions. And my question is, if you're elected, how can you support consistent curriculum and instruction in all classrooms to make school engaging all day long instead of only in certain classes?
Well, first of all, let's make sure that, So let's talk about then what we would need to do is we need to talk about the classes that are working for you, right? And then we need to talk about what qualities are in those classes that are working. And then with that, let's talk about the classes that aren't working well for you and what we can do there. Now, as an administrator, a principal can coach the teachers to help them, but I also think that it would be really great if we had student input. You know, when I went to college, and in college, you get to fill out an evaluation form of your professor, and it's something that we always do at staff developments and things like that. We fill out an evaluation, and I think that's really something that would be a wonderful thing to add. Now, do we want students grading a teacher? Kind of, yeah. I mean, are we going to use that to decide if they're a good teacher? No, probably not. But what we can use it for is to decide how to make that experience better for the kids and work for you guys. And that was a lot of talking, but does that make sense?
Yeah. Okay. My last question is, if elected, what strategies will you implement to help prevent students from falling behind and ensure they maintain a strong GPA to successfully graduate and have a good future?
I think supporting the schools and first of all, supporting the programs that are already in place. I think the other part too is that when we see schools that don't have as many staff, because that's really that's the bottom line, right? We need staff in the classrooms. And once we have staff in the classrooms, a lot of things would be a lot better, right? I just got nervous too. See, I get nervous too. Talking about, what was the question about?
The question was, if elected, what strategies will you implement to help prevent students from falling behind and ensure they maintain a strong GPA to successfully graduate and have a good future?
Good. Okay, that's right. All right, falling behind. When we talk about why a student falling behind, we also need to look at why they're falling behind. So then we can look at a school and say, okay, these kids are falling behind. What's happening here that we need to do to fix that? And then you need to go in and implement that. And I think that there isn't a cookie cutter response to this question, right? Because every kid is different. You know, one kid might be falling behind because they're having a hard time with the curriculum. Another kid might be falling behind because they're not motivated. Another kid might be falling behind because they're not getting enough sleep at night. And so I think that we have to look at an individual basis. We can say, oh, we're going to do all of these things, but also if we don't put into place that individual attention, those things that the kids need, you know, that person that checks in and says, hey, how you doing today? What's up? You know, that's what you guys need. You guys need that connection, and we have to foster that as much as we can.
How can schools better support students with diverse learning needs?
Well, I know there are programs, right, to help students with diverse learning needs. I also know that not all the teachers know how to use those techniques or programs. And I think training's good. You know, we have to keep the staff trained so they're aware of interventions and different things you can do to modify the curriculum. But then also, again, we got to rely on the students, right? My daughter has a learning disability, and she's young enough that she won't see this, but sometimes when she's learning something or she's trying to look at something, I say, how does this look to you? What does that mean? What does that question mean? And I think that's important. And learning that, you know, she can look different and it looks like she is not paying attention because she's drawing or writing, but she is paying attention. And just understanding that every single kid that comes into the doors, which I get because I was a classroom teacher for 15 years, every kid that comes in that door has a unique way of learning. And I think that if more teachers understood that, it would be a lot better. You know, my own son, one of my other children, has attention deficit and hyperactivity, right? And I remember one time he was jumping up and down, and I was telling him something. And finally I was like, what did I just say? And he repeated it back to me word for word. And there I went, oh, okay. And I think that if we have more of those aha moments, then we're going to be doing a lot better.